talking about the Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Yeah, okay. So, number one hit in America, $75 million gross so far. You know, it may take more than that. Based, albeit loosely, on a true story, Annalisa Michel, who died. Now, she was German, and she died in 1976. She was diagnosed by the church as having been, or by her local church, as having been troubled by demonic spirits. There was a lengthy exorcism, which I think lasted something like 8 months. And after she died, there was a court hearing, as to whether or not the priests involved had been guilty of negligent manslaughter. This case then inspires this movie written and directed by Scott Derrickson, which takes the basic idea of the central character, Emily Rose, who is a very, very troubled young woman who may be schizophrenic or may be possessed by the devil. Her priest is played by Tom Wilkinson. At the beginning of the movie, she dies. It's the very, very beginning of the film starts with her dying. The movie then plays out in flashback as a courtroom drama in which we have Laura Linney as the defender, Tom Wilkinson as the priest, who have to go to court to demonstrate that he was not negligent, that what he was actually trying to do was to help Emily Rose. Let's hear a clip. Now, kind of encapsulated in that clip is what's right and what's wrong with the film. On the one hand, if you're interested in demonic possession and all that sort of stuff, which I am, obviously, it is an interesting case. At least the original case was interesting, and what remains of the original case in the film is interesting. It's a courtroom drama in which they are discussing whether or not a priest was actually negligent in thinking that the way to save this girl's, was through spiritual guidance rather than through medicine, and that's really what it all comes down to. And on the one hand, there is an interesting story in the middle of that, which is kind of fascinating because the defence attorney, as she said, she's an agnostic, she's not a believer. He's a priest, he obviously believes in what he's done, and what we see is flashbacks to the scenes of the woman either being demonically possessed or being mad. They do this very well. They show you a version of the scene in which she's clearly demonically possessed, and they'll show you another version of the scene in which what she's doing is just behaving in a disturbed way. And that is well pulled off. The problem is that what Scott Derrickson has seen fit to do, is to then throw a whole bunch of completely melodramatic hogwash into the mix, which thoroughly undercuts the sense of an engrossing, intelligent drama. One perfect example is recalcitrant witnesses lurk around in alleyways and then suddenly get knocked down by demonic cars that appear out of... It's like, you don't need to do this. The story itself is interesting enough. Also, you don't have to have people giving completely ludicrous speeches about what they believe and what they don't believe and what they think and this, that and the other. I mean, look, I am very, very in favour of people taking dramatic license, but more melodrama is not necessarily more factually engrossing. And I think the real shame of Emily Rose, there's one great line in it when the defence attorney is examining a witness who's a specialist in possession, and she says, "Tell me why you think Emily Rose may have been possessed." And the witness is saying, "Well, some people are very sensitive, and some people are." And the prosecution lawyer sticks his hand up and says, "Objection, Your Honour." And the judge says, "On what grounds?" He says, "Well, on grounds of silliness." And you think, actually, that is it. That is my objection to this film, is it has drifted into the territory of silliness, which is a shame, because there's a couple of quite creepy set pieces. If you've seen the trailer, incidentally, the trailer is scarier than the film. But there are a couple of good creepy set pieces. There's a very good performance by Jennifer Carpenter, who plays Emily Rose. Very physical performance. Reminded me to some extent of the overlooked performance in Ruby, which was an Exorcist rip-off back in, about 20 years ago now. It's not a very good film, but it's featured a very good performance by the woman who played the possessed girl in that. And it's a very physical performance, but it's increasingly frustrating as the movie decides, in fact, all it wants to do is be a silly Exorcist rip-off, which I have very, very little time for. There is apparently another version of this story in the pipeline, which is called Requiem, by a German director, which I think is going to come out next year, which I'm kind of looking forward to, so that may be interesting. But in the end, the Exorcism of Emily Rose is flawed. It's overly flawed. There are things that are good in it, but they are all lost in the hogwash.